Hey guys, welcome to the Student Side Hustle. So in this show, what we're trying to do is, I'm trying to share stories of individuals and people who generally are doing something unique, doing something entrepreneurial, doing something that they're passionate about and trying to make it their career. That's not necessarily the thing that allows you to be on the show or qualifies you to be a guest on the show, but that's generally what we're talking about. We're talking about entrepreneurship, passion, etc. A lot of it revolves around bodybuilding and fitness because that's what I'm personally interested in. But what I want you to take away from this is just the fact that you can do whichever passion that you'd like to do, and you can make that into a career. It's a long path, but you can make it happen. And basically what I'm doing is showing you 80 plus examples of people who are doing it and who have done it. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I would love if you would subscribe because we've got a lot of new episodes coming out. And yeah, thank you so much for listening.
People are constantly raising the bar.
Sacrifices need to be made.
What would you guys say are your biggest weaknesses?
You or your enemy right now?
It's success of life.
Just a fucking podcast.
Hey guys, welcome to the Student Side Hustle. This week I'm speaking to Greg Nuckles. So I hope you know who Greg Nuckles is. If you don't, then you probably should know. So Greg is an education, he runs an education and coaching company called Stronger by Science. So hopefully you've heard of that, because that is something that I heard of pretty soon when I got into the industry. And then also he's one of the co-owners of Mass, and that is basically they take a lot of very hard to read articles, make them sort of simple, and it's sort of like I can't think of the word. They call it a research
review.
Yeah, research review. That's the one. And he's also a very, very strong competitive powerlifter. So it's sort of like he's got the best of both worlds. He knows how to read research, knows how to analyze it, knows how to coach, and he's fucking strong. So there's a lot of good things to this dude. So Greg, how did you get into fitness? How did you get into all of this? And how did you start Stronger by Science, Mass, all that sort of stuff?
So first off, thanks for having me on. It's
my pleasure.
It's an honor. So to start with how I got into lifting, I grew up playing sports. It's just what my childhood was like, played sports every season of the year. And I really took a liking to basketball.
Right.
And initially got into lifting because I'm about 178 centimeters and I wanted to be able to dunk. Right. Which, that's not particularly tall. And so I initially got into lifting just so I could get my vertical up for basketball. Also playing football, American football at the time, and wound up with some pretty major concussion issues,
right,
from football. And so that knocked me out of, real sports. But the guy who had been training me for basketball, his name was Travis Mash. At the time, he was one of the best equipped powerlifters in the world. And so he was like, it sucks for the time being, but this isn't the worst thing that could have happened to you because you're a lot better at lifting weights than you are at basketball. So then I just started powerlifting to basically have an outlet for my competitive drives. And so that's how I got into powerlifting, and I just fell in love with it immediately. And so I've been doing that ever since, going on 13 years now, give or take. I've been just kind of messing around lifting weights a little bit longer than that. That's going on 17 years.
Wow.
But yeah, powerlifting for about 13 or so. And then in terms of how I got into having a business and doing this thing professionally, I always kind of thought I wanted to do it, but I wasn't really aware of any fitness careers that one could have other than a personal trainer. And I would have been totally fine being a personal trainer. But my parents were very hard driving. And they wanted me to be a doctor, a lawyer, or something like that.
Right.
So when I floated that idea at home, they were not at all happy about it. So I initially went into college as a history major.
Right.
And I was planning on getting a history PhD and being a professor somewhere. Got to my senior capstone class in history and realized that I didn't actually want any of the jobs I could get with that degree.
Yeah.
Once I got a better idea of what all that entailed. Am I allowed to curse on this podcast? That's fine.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I was about to, but then I'm like, some people have weird functions.
No, that's fine.
Anyway, so at that point, I just said, fuck it. I'm going to do exercise science and let the chips fall where they may.
Yeah.
So I transferred to exercise science. And also at the time, one of my main training partners was my then girlfriend, now wife, Lindsay. And I was just obsessed with lifting and powerlifting, and so I just talked to her about it all the time. And she kind of got annoyed with me about that and said, you should start a blog, so maybe you can find other people who are just as obsessed with this as you are. So I started like a little personal blog just for fun. And then after college, I had a job lined up at a gym back home in North Carolina. And Lindsay got an internship in California, which is the entire opposite side of the country. So can't really square that circle. The internship she got was like super prestigious. So like that was definitely the better opportunity. She was only guaranteed 12 weeks on the front end. So it was hard for me to like walk into a gym and say like, hey, you should hire me as a trainer, but I might be gone 2 months from now. So at that point, like readership of the blog had kind of just grown organically over time. But I hadn't really tried to like turn it into a business and monetize it. But at that point, so she wasn't getting paid that much for her internship. I got a job as content manager for JCS Strength with Chad Wesley Smith.
Right.
He paid me a fair salary, but like Southern California is ridiculously expensive.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, hey, let's see if I can monetize this website I've been working on, so we don't wind up living under a bridge.
Yeah.
And so, did that, and it's worked out much better than I expected it to.
How did you know? Was it sort of like with that jump? Because I find for a lot of people, like for myself, the day that I monetize this podcast is going to be quite, like that's going to be scary or quite monumentous for me. How did you make that jump between that sort of knowing, okay, I could monetize this could happen, and it's not, it's like, were you fearful at that time? Because I think a lot of people, if they have a thing that they've made and it's got listeners or viewers, they don't want to fuck that up. And obviously it's very shown that you can monetize things now without killing them. But were you scared at that time? What was the sort of
No, not really. So I was very fortunate, and I've been very fortunate in a lot of ways throughout my life, but specifically as far as starting the business goes, I was really fortunate in that I had a really long runway before I needed to try to monetize anything.
Yeah.
So before I tried to sell anything, like my site had been rolling along for like 2.5, 3 years, something like that. And it like, I wasn't even thinking of it as a business at that point. Like I was just putting free content out into the world because I thought it was fun and I liked doing it.
Yeah.
Whereas like the calculus may have been completely different if it was like, oh, I need to make money tomorrow and I'm registering my domain name today, you know? So I had the time to build a big enough readership that like by the time it came time to monetize, I knew that, you know, even if I had like an incredibly small conversion rate, like things were still going to work out okay.
Yeah.
And I also, like, I did have the job with Juggernaut, which, you know, like that definitely paid enough to keep food on the table and a roof over our heads. And I also, like, so if Lindsay's internship didn't work out, which, like, long story short, she didn't get fired, but it was a terrible gig, so she quit. But so even knowing that could have happened, I still had like an offer at that gym back home in North Carolina. So, you know, we could have just moved back home, and if the website business didn't work, still could have got a good coaching somewhere. So I had a long runway, and I also had a very solid safety net. So that made it a little bit less scary.
Do you feel like
it was more?
Was that sort of that runway? Because say for myself, right now I have a huge runway, right? Like I'm in that sort of stage now. I'm like trying to see if I can, because I'm doing 1 degree, but I want to do exercise science afterwards, so I can basically do what you, Eric, etc. does, and see if I can use that long ass runway of time to build this, and then, make it fly. But do you think it's at the time, did you know that it was going to work, or were you just kind of like, it'll probably work? I've already got some evidence behind it. People listen, people read it. That sort of shows it'll probably work.
Yeah, I mean, so I was pretty confident things would work out. So I had one other big thing going for me, and that is that like my readership got big enough and kind of spread far enough that people who had much larger audiences were also reading.
Right.
So I launched my first product with Omar Isaf, who I have no idea where his YouTube channel is at now, but at the time it was like 250,000 subscribers or so, which was quite large. And he made a video that was basically just like a breakdown of one of my articles and linked to it. And so I just hit him up out of the blue, and I was like, "Hey, dude, glad you enjoyed the article." And then we chatted for a few weeks, and I was like, "Hey, want to put out a product together?"
Yeah.
So I knew that I had a big enough audience that I was pretty confident that what I put out would be successful, even if it was just me. And then also I had that added safety net of, we're also launching this to Omar's audience. So, and it was huge. So even if it had infinitesimally small conversion rates, things would be fine.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, and I think that when I started taking it seriously as a business, one of the advantages I had, just kind of so I had 2 advantages that were just the hardwired things about me. One is that I picked really good parents, and so I'm naturally a strong dude. So I completely recognize that if I picked worse parents and I trained the exact same way that I have, but wound up much less strong, there would probably be fewer people who cared what I had to say, especially early on.
Right.
So that absolutely helped. And I'm also kind of obsessive when it comes to not being bored.
Yeah.
And I think that one of the things that sinks a lot of people who try to start some sort of content-based business in fitness is they're just so goddamn boring and derivative.
Yeah.
Especially I almost think that the charlatans are better about this because they can be interesting because they're just making shit up. And
when you say charlatans, what do you mean by that? Do you mean basically influencers? Are we talking Simeon Panda sort of thing, or what is a charlatan?
Yeah, or Dave Asprey or whatever.
Right. Okay.
Food Babe, people whose businesses are completely predicated on just pulling stuff out of their ass.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Because you only have to be minimally creative to come up with interesting bullshit.
Yeah.
Whereas the whole evidence-based community is just kind of predicated on almost articles of faith where people say the exact same thing in the exact same way. And so it's hard to differentiate yourself without kind of veering into Wooville.
Right.
And so I after the learning of the evidence-based fitness community and reading some of that content for a few years, I just got really, really bored with it because I was look, I'm reading this article, which is the exact same article that I've read from 5 different people over the last 2 years.
Right.
You're saying the exact same stuff in the exact same way. So, I was so bored by that. I was okay, how can I say something new or put a different spin on it or dig up references for some topic haven't touched on yet. So, like, for example, I had an article a few years ago looking at sarcoplasmic hypertrophy, which was, like, not long ago, just taken as an article of faith that it was, like, bro science and absolutely impossible. Right. But then when I looked at the arguments people were using to support that, it was, like, there weren't really any references to back it up. Right. It was just kind of taken as an article of faith. So I was like, let's, like, dig into this and see if there is actually anything there worth writing about. And my bias going into it is that there probably wasn't. But then, you know, I found that, like, definitely not, like, proof that sarcoplasmic hypertrophy exists, but, like, reasonably strong evidence that it can probably occur. Right. And so, like, that took a tremendous amount of work because, you know, I was, like, at one point I was trying to find a pirated copy of a meat science textbook that was published in 1980 because according to Google books, it had, like, information on, like, the relative fractions of myofibrillar versus sarcoplasmic proteins, which, like, I couldn't, like, I didn't have a reference for that in, like, any of the textbooks that I owned. But like it was a ton of work. But then when the article dropped, like, it was really popular and successful and got out to a lot of people. And, like, I didn't have to sell my soul to put that article out because it was very solid and well researched. Yeah. But it was the kind of thing that, like, I did that most other people just wouldn't do.
Do you feel like that's what differentiated you? Because, like, for myself, there's a few things that I know could differentiate me, but I feel like it's leaning towards the influencer path, and I don't know if I really want to go there. But it's like, did you sort of know what would differentiate you? Was it that sort of writing things that are actually interesting? Because that's the thing that I think gets me about a lot of podcasters is they just ask boring ass logical questions, and it's like no one cares, and so it's like, you know, no one wants to listen to that.
I think you can do 4 things to differentiate you. Right. Either do the same thing that other people are doing, but just do it way better. Yeah. So, like, for example, like my squat, bench, deadlift guides, like, I feel very confident that they're the best guides to those lifts out there, and absolutely the best free guides, like, no questions asked. Yeah. And I'm not necessarily saying anything different from other people in those guides. They're just better and more comprehensive than what was out there at the time. You can do the same thing as everyone else, but just do it noticeably better. Yeah. And I feel like I probably sound arrogant saying that, but, like, those 3 pieces of content specifically, I feel are objectively exceptional. You can do things different. So, like, finding areas that no one's talking about, and bringing them into the conversation, and, like, or if there's, like, the same conversation going on, like, bringing new references into it, like, stuff like that. Right. So you can do things better. You can do things different. You can do things more professionally. So these days, like, most fitness sites, or, well, not most, but a lot of them generally look decent. But, man, if you could, like, jump in a time machine to 2014, like, most fitness sites just look like absolute ass. And, like, it's so shallow, but people make a snap judgment when they land on a website. Like, if it looks like it's a, like, GeoCities site from 1996, you're instantly going to think, like, oh, this is probably kind of dodgy. Whereas, like, if it looks clean and professional, you're like, oh, like, this seems like a well-run operation. Maybe they have something interesting to say. Yeah.
Like, even when I went on the site for Mass, it's like, just how clean that site works. Just the intro page, like, that sort of showed me, like, oh shit, you know. And there's, like, a ton of stuff on there which sort of shows you this is probably a good idea to buy this, you know, like. Yeah. And that was very, very compelling. And do you think making it that professional can give it that, like, having it that look that good?
How did we get it to look that good?
I don't know, just in general. Do you think making it look that good sort of can create quite an edge? Because I think a lot of people brush over it. They sort of think, oh, it just needs to look good enough. But I guess, because when I was just scrolling through the front page, it's like there's so many smooth animations and just everything flows so well. Yeah. And I was about to buy it, but I'm a poor student and I at some point.
No,
I want it so bad. But it's like that thing. Do you think that smoothness and just the perfection of the front page, do you think that can differentiate you quite a lot?
Oh, for sure. Like, I mean, it shouldn't. If humans were perfectly objective robots, it wouldn't. But
yeah, but it does. You know,
in the world we live in, like, you know, clean design, looking professional, like, definitely makes a difference. And then I would say the last thing, like a way that one can differentiate themselves on top of those other three is just like being obsessive about being really good at the medium you choose to communicate with.
Yes.
So like, I'm not a podcaster. If I tried to make a podcast, I'd probably get some listeners just because my general audience is fairly large, but I don't think I would draw people in due to my podcasting skill.
Right. Yeah.
But like, I'm primarily a writer. That's what I do. And I put a lot of work into being a good writer. Like, and I don't think I'm Hemingway, but like,
yeah.
I think that if most people like stumble on a Stronger by Science article versus stumbling on an article from some other fitness site, I think that I do a better job writing than most people, just in terms of like command of the English language. And that's not totally me, by the way. My wife has a background in journalism. She was a copy editor for a major newspaper. She absolutely helps the quality of the writing as well. But just like that,
the quality of the articles is so high that it's like that differentiates as well. Yeah.
And like, this is another thing that bugs me about like evidence-based fitness people. Like, a lot of them have backgrounds in science. They're used to writing scientific publications and communicating with other scientists. And so, like, when they write something for general consumption, like, it reads like a journal article.
Yeah.
And, like, everyone knows no one really reads journal articles. And so, like, if you're writing in a style that's inaccessible for the people you want to read it, they're just not going to read it.
How do you go about making it accessible? Because even for myself with this podcast, a lot of the time I struggle because it's not purely a fitness podcast, but I want to make it easily accessible, but I want to get into the nitty gritty. And I think there's I'd say if we're going down a process of explaining hypertrophy, for example, we have to explain first what that is, how you get it, all these things, and just explain a lot. And do you think, is that the sort of way that you make it accessible to the person who wouldn't normally read a journal article? Like, the person who just wants to read an article that they can comprehend? How do you go about making it easy to read and fun to read?
So there are several things you can do. One, and like, this is going to sound like a little thing, but it makes a big difference. And this wouldn't matter as much for podcasting, but in terms of like written content, people hate acronyms. Like,
right.
if you're talking, say like body comp, and you're talking about like intracellular fluid and extracellular fluid, like, it's not that hard to just spell those things out. But if like people see like ICF and ECF like 30 times in a sentence, like it just starts looking like word salad. Like, it's not appealing. And there's like word count limits in journals, so it's understandable that people do that for scientific writing. But like, there are very few things that it makes sense to abbreviate for like lay articles. Yeah. So like 1RM, like, I'll abbreviate that. Like DEXA, I'm not going to spell out dual energy X-ray absorptiometry every time. But like, for the most part, like, if it makes sense to not make something an acronym, like, that just makes it more accessible. Generally, like I'll give way more background information than I would were I writing a journal article. So like, you have to know who you're writing to.
Yes.
And the people that I'm writing to are like my target person is someone who's generally intelligent. They know a reasonable amount about lifting weights, but they're not a scientist. And so anything that like you would only know if you had been through a degree program for exercise science, like, I make sure I go back and explain that.
Right.
So people just get 4 sentences into an article and realize like, oh shit, I'm super lost.
Yes. I think that's quite a good quality, because have you read The Perennial Seller by Ryan Holiday? Because I think you do a great job of encompassing the teachings of that book, because it's basically about creating something that'll last for decades, and it sounds like a lot of the work that you create could do that. And I think it's a very hard task to do that, because it's easy to write a nice piece on keto right now and have that be good for the next 6 months, but say if you wrote a comprehensive piece on it, it might be. I think it's a much harder task to create that, but it would do it more justice in the long term. And I think you do a great job of that. Do you think?
Oh, that's what we do. Like we're all about evergreen content. Like before I publish an article, I think to myself, like, can I see people linking this in Facebook arguments 4 years from now? Like, would they choose this over the multitude of other articles that they can pick? Like, that's just kind of the standard that I hold things to.
Yes. You can't just half-ass it if the differentiation is how good the work is.
Yeah. And then the last thing, just for making scientific writing more accessible, is two more things. So one, I try to strip away as much of the jargon as possible without losing nuance. So like, for example, like in a math article, since that's a research review, like we'll talk about like the nuances of statistical tests sometimes. But like if I'm writing that for Stronger by Science, like typically instead of saying like A was significantly better than B, p-value, whatever, effect size, whatever. Like, I would say, if it's a significant finding, like, I'll use clear, unambiguous language that A was different than B. If it was kind of like small effect size, nearly significant, I'll say, like, A tended to be better than B. But, like maintain the same, like, essence of meaning while stripping away jargon. Right. And then the last thing is just trying to use like conversational language. So like this is one of the things I do before I publish anything, which like for budding writers out there, like this will help your writing more than just about anything. Once you get done writing something, before you publish it, read it out loud. And I don't mean just kind of like read and like mumble along. Like, read it out loud as if you're delivering it as a speech or like a lecture. And if something feels weird to say, or if like, you have like a run-on sentence and you're getting like tripped up midway through the sentence because you're not quite sure what like a comma is denoting or something. Right. Like if you as the writer have a hard time speaking it, someone else who didn't write it, who's not aware of your intent is going to have a hard time reading it. Right. Yeah. So like, then I go through and try to make things more conversational, split up sentences. So like meanings are more clear. But yeah, like it's not incredibly hard to, so like some aspects of science would be like really, really hard to make accessible for the lay public. Yes. So like I do not envy someone like Brian Greene, who's trying to make like theoretical physics accessible for the lay public. But like sports science, man, like it's not rocket science. If you can't make sports science accessible, like either you're just a bad writer or you don't understand it well enough to make it accessible. Like I would say like a sports science journal article is maybe like 1 to 2 steps above what someone with no scientific background could read as is. So if you can't bring it down those 1 to 2 steps, like you just need more practice. Like it shouldn't really be that hard. But a lot of, I think a lot of people just, especially who have careers in the sciences, like they don't understand how bad of writers they are for lay consumption. Because like they could be absolutely incredible scientific writers, but like it just doesn't translate.
How do you sort of like apart from with the main thing you do to sort of check your articles and make sure they're doing well, would that be the reading it out loud, or do you sort of... Because I've always been a shit writer, and I know that, and I just don't think I'll ever be a good writer, and I'm fine with that. Because I tried blogging once, and I just found it a hard, horrible task, and I just couldn't do it. I do not understand how you do it. Do you find for you, is it just the medium that flows, like, super well? Like, for me, podcasts just work.
It does now. The biggest advice I'd give really anyone is find a good editor who understands the English language really well and doesn't understand the topic you're writing about very well. So like at this point, like my wife probably knows more about exercise science than a lot of exercise science grad students, just because she's had to edit so much of my writing, and because much to her chagrin, the blog didn't work, and I still rant about it at home all the time. But like when I was first starting out, like she didn't know much about it, but like she had a very strong grasp of the English language, and so when I was sending an article to her, she was cleaning up a bunch of like punctuation and grammar shit. But there were also a lot of places where she'd be like, dude, like I have no idea what you're trying to say right here. And so just like getting that feedback constantly on everything I wrote, made me think, like, before I would send an article to her, be like, so is Lindsay going to understand this?
Right.
And like these days she understands it, but like just that constant practice of like, cause like she's my avatar. Like she's bright. She knows a decent amount about lifting. Like she's been training for like, going on like 8 years, like 6 or 7 years at this point. So like she understands lifting pretty well. She's very bright, but she's not a sports scientist. So like, you know, I can just kind of like pitch my articles to like, would Lindsay enjoy this?
Yes.
But you could like, you can just think about like really anyone you know who kind of matches who your target audience is. Like,
yes.
You know, like say you have a training partner who's like generally smart but not involved in exercise science at all, or like whatever your field is. Just think like, you know, I'm writing to this person. If I gave them this article, like, would they understand it and would they enjoy it?
I think that would be quite a valuable thing, because for me, I try to keep my audience in mind as I sort of make a podcast, or sort of, I think it's possibly harder with a podcast because it's meant to be a conversation, and you're not meant to, I don't think you're meant to try and direct it. Well, you are trying to direct it, but you're not trying to, you can't go back and edit it. Or you can, but you can't really go back and edit what you said unless you actually talk over what you said. So it's sort of, what you say is what you say. And I think...
And you're also somewhat at the mercy of if this American asshole you have on just rants about something for 20 minutes. Like, whatever.
Yeah, usually I've never really had, like... I find most of the guests I have on are just fantastic. Like, it's pretty crazy. I thought I'd have more people on that I'd be like, fuck, when is the show gonna end? But it's just like, it's pretty much always phenomenal. I don't know if it's just because I try to stay away from the influencers and all that. Like, they're great, but I don't want to have, like, whoever on when they just tell me some bro science shit and I'm dying inside the whole time. And I don't want to just call them out for an hour. Like, do it.
Have someone,
there's a few times
have someone you deeply disagree with and just like roast them until they hang up.
I want to do that at some point, but I don't think I know enough about exercise science yet, because it's just like, oh god, it'd be fun though. I want to host like get someone on who knows a lot about exercise science versus someone who acts like they do, and just have them destroy them, and that'd be fun. God.
Just record that. Just record that with like Eric in the room, but like off camera, and then he'll be like messaging you like stuff to roast them on the whole time. That'd be perfect.
Oh, that'd be brutal, because Eric's in Auckland as well, so that could work. Fuck. Oh no, I think the whole creative process is like, it's a hard thing, and I think, because how long have you been writing for? Like a long time now, probably like.
I mean, I've been writing like for school forever.
Yeah. Do you think that's what made you sort of go down the path of writing? Because I know one of my friends, he's a history major as well, and he did history, well, he's doing history, and he's like, the amount that he writes is just a fuck ton. Like, he wants to write a book, and I'm just like, Jesus.
Oh, yeah.
I can't even fathom that. Like,
Dude,
I don't want to write one 1,500 word essay. Like, that's enough for me. Like,
dude, being a history major was a trial by fire as far as writing goes. Because, like, in high school, it would be like, write a 5-page essay and you have 2 months to do it. Like, get to college and it's like, write a 15-page essay and you need 20 sources, 12 of which have to be books that you're going to have to speed read. And it's due next Tuesday.
Oh,
like,
fuck that.
That's just kind of how it goes. So when people ask me, like, dude, how do you write, like, 5,000-word blog posts? It's like, well, like, I cut my teeth writing 15,000-word, like, history shit.
Yes.
So, like, by comparison, it's small potatoes.
What do you do when you get to, like... Because if you compare it back to studying, it's like, say if you're sitting down and you're like, fuck, I don't want to study this. It's like, there's a tendency to just reach for your phone or do whatever and just not commit to it fully and not just be in the zone. Is there anything you do to, like, get in the zone or just eliminate distractions or all that sort of stuff?
The problem I have is starting.
Yeah.
Like, I can procrastinate for hours before ever, like, actually writing the first word of something. But, like, once I actually get going, like, I might look up from the computer and, 4 hours have passed and I have 5,000 words written. Like,
right.
That's... So I definitely have issues getting going, but, like, I've personally not had issues with getting distracted once I actually start writing.
Because I think that's quite a... Because for me, it's like there's no... Like, editing a podcast, it's already done for you pretty much. You just have to listen to it, make sure no one's sneezing on the mic or something. Like, it's pretty much... It's very simple. Is there anything you found helps with that sort of starting anxiety or starting nerves or whatever you'd call it?
Not really.
Still trying to figure that one out.
Yeah.
Is there any like writing or books that you'd really recommend, or something that you think would, one, make people a better writer, creator, etc., but also if they're fitness books or anything that you just swear by?
Oh man. I mean, as far as becoming a better writer goes, like, I really think the biggest thing is just to get an editor. I mean, there's a reason that companies that put out the written word professionally all have editors. Like, book publishers have editors, newspapers have editors, magazines have editors. And those are, like, professional writers, like, putting out that content, but they still have editors making sure it looks good and reads well. So, yeah, like, I think that anything you could read about writing is fine, but you're not actually getting, like, real feedback on the pieces you write unless you're sending that to another human and getting it critiqued. So I think that, like, actually having an editor is indispensable. In terms of, like, things to read that I just swear by, like, I'm a huge Lord of the Rings nerd. So read Lord of the Rings.
You should come to New Zealand. It's everywhere.
Oh, I'd love to. Like, I would say probably 80% of what I know about New Zealand is behind the scenes of Lord of the Rings.
And then the other 20% is, like, Eric Helms related.
Pretty much, yeah. Let's see. So in terms of, like, nonfiction stuff, one book that I strongly recommend, and, like, the title sounds, like, weird and wooey, but, like, I promise you it's a really good book. It's called Power, Sex, Suicide, Mitochondria, and the Meaning of Life by Nick Lane. It's a whole book about mitochondria, and it's so much more interesting than it sounds. Like, I love that book. Recently read Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari.
It's a bit scary,
though, really, really good.
It's kind of like, oh shit, I don't know if it was that one or the other one, but it's kind of like, oh shit, soon we're all going to have no jobs. Everyone's going to be homeless. We're all fucked.
Oh, I think that was Homo Deuce.
Yeah, that one was.
I have not.
It is scary. Not a fan at all. One thing that I would like to touch on though is when back after you were doing history, and then you sort of decided to switch to exercise science. What was the thing that sort of, how did you make that decision? Because for a lot of people, it's a very hard one. Like for myself right now, I'm studying podiatry, which if you know what that is, you cannot really relate that to bodybuilding and powerlifting. It's not that fun. I don't like it. I liked it at the start, but now I'm like, fuck this. I want to do exercise science.
Just make sure that pressure is on the right part of your foot to fully activate the tibialis anterior or whatever. Like, I don't know.
Oh yeah, it's just, you can't, like, we'll be in a lecture and I'll somehow relate it to bodybuilding and powerlifting. I'll ask a question about it and they'll be like, "What the fuck? We're talking about like fucking running gait or something, or something like that," and they're just like, "Brother, what the fuck?" And I'm like, "Well, what can you do?" And like one time there was a slide and they mentioned steroids on it one time, and they said blanket statement, all steroids cause something, and I'm like, how can you say that? Blah blah blah. I just argued with them for a bit, and it was like, yeah, that's pretty much my extent of pain right now. But effectively, I'm wanting to switch degrees, and I've pretty much made that decision in my mind. What was the thing, or how did you sort of make that decision for yourself? Was it an easy decision? What was the sort of thought process there?
Yeah, so that's another area where I was very fortunate. So like I don't know what higher education in New Zealand is like, but in the US it's very expensive. So a lot of times, like if people choose a major, they're just kind of locked in. Otherwise they might have to go a few more years and have to spend, another like $30,000-$40,000 on their education. So I was lucky in a couple ways. One, I took a lot of classes in high school that allowed me to place out of college classes.
Right.
So I went into a 4-year degree, basically starting my third year. And then I also had a full ride scholarship. So like my tuition and room and board and books were paid for. So I could have graduated college in 2 years if I wanted to. Like if I would have stuck with history, like I could have been out in 2 years. And so I got to the senior capstone class, like in my second year at college. And that's when I realized like, oh, I don't actually want to do any of this. And so like I could, then transfer to exercise science. I still had 2 years of my scholarship. And I didn't still have like a bunch of general education classes I had to take. So I had like a really big cushion built in, which made it a really easy decision for me. It was like, I don't want to do this history thing anymore. I always kind of wanted to do exercise science in the first place. So like, fuck it, that's what I'm doing. Yeah. And I didn't have to deliberate about it all that much. So yeah, like I don't think that that's really a generalizable experience, but that made it a fairly easy decision for me.
And then I think another thing that I'd like to touch on is, how do you go about becoming respected in fitness? Because whenever I hear like your name or Eric Helms' name or a bunch of other people, it's like there's universal respect and universal, like, even if I don't agree with everything they say, I respect them and I want to, like, for the most part, they probably say things that are pretty well thought out, very researched, and actually admirable that they say. Is there anything you'd recommend for people getting into fitness to be one of the ones that sticks around and that isn't just, here for like 3 years because they're jacked and young? Like, is there anything you'd recommend for that? Like, to try and be respected in the long term in fitness?
Yeah. So a few things. One is to be respectable. So I get that that's like recursive reasoning. But some people are treated in ways that aren't necessarily like befitting how they behave themselves. But for the most part, like if you behave well, other people will realize that you behave well. Yes. And so that's less about what you say and more about how you say it and how you carry yourself. Like it's perfectly fine to be wrong as long as you're open to changing your mind and you're not just a dick to people who disagree with you. So just behaving in a respectable way goes a long way. Not opening your mouth if you don't know what you're talking about helps a lot.
That's one that I only just learned.
Dude, one of the things that I'm very grateful for is, so like when I first got into writing, like a lot of the stuff I said was just like complete bullshit. But like I didn't know any better. It's like what I had always kind of been told. I wasn't really into the science yet. And so like I wrote some stuff that was just like absolute shit. But there were like 4 people reading my site at the time. And so like, you know,
fine.
Like, yeah, it's not like I was putting bullshit out to like 50,000 people who all read it and will remember that forever because the internet never forgets. So like, I think one of the things that helped me a lot is learning, like, you know, if I don't know what I'm talking about, don't open my mouth generally. Or if I'm basically like the confidence of what you say should match your ability to back it up.
Right.
So like at this point, like if I make a really strong statement, it's because I feel like there's a lot of evidence to support it. And if someone challenged me on it, I could back it up well. If I say something that I'm less confident about, then I try to use more like language that gives me more of an out. Like, not like, you know this, but it seems to be whatever. You know, like,
more
so that helps a lot. Like, people will give you a lot of leeway if you're wrong, if you can go back and realize you were wrong and admit it. People give you less leeway and you lose more respect if you are very confident and very wrong often. But if you're tentative and wrong about something, like that's forgivable. Like you can say like, oh, this seems to be what's going on, and then you realize that's not the case, and people will realize like, oh, like he wasn't like putting his foot down and like this was the hill he was going to die on. Like, you know, he just hadn't looked at all the evidence yet, and he was wrong about something, and that's fine. Move on with life. But yeah, being very confident and very wrong frequently will lose you a lot of points. And then, like, I'm not incredibly crazy about this, but one other thing that has to be noted is there's like a sociological aspect to, well, really to everything. And so like, I worry about this a lot less now. But like coming up, like I knew who the big dogs were. I knew who people generally respected. And so like, you know, I knew that like, if I'm on these people's good side and they talk well of me, that will make other people think well of me. So, you know, there were a few people who like, I would be less likely to like call out or question than normal. Oh, and that's another big thing as well. So, and this just kind of irks me about like the evidence-based community in general. Right. There's just like such like a call out culture and like culture of like debunking everything. Yeah. And it's incredibly it can be incredibly antagonistic. It's like there are a lot of people who treat being wrong as if it's a moral offense. Right. Because so I think it's almost like an excess of empathy sometimes. Like people will put themselves in another person's shoes and realize like, you know, I know all of this information. So if I made the statement that this other person is making, I would be lying because I would know that it was an incorrect statement. Right. Therefore, if they're making this incorrect statement, they are lying and have some sort of like agenda. Right. So like when you go into it with that mindset, you're less likely to give people charity. And so something that's something I've tried to avoid. And just generally assume that people are acting in good faith. And like, if I see someone like spouting bullshit, then like, oftentimes I'll just message them privately and like we don't do the whole like public social media argument thing.
Yeah. Do you think there's a place for that? Do you think there's a place to say, guys, don't listen to this person, they're spewing bullshit, or do you think there's a place, or?
I don't know.
I think it's good that you're able to say that, because I think people who are unable to say, I don't know, it's a dangerous path.
As a matter of tactics, I think that you have to think through your actions and think about like what change you're trying to affect.
Right. Yes.
So if it's more like, given a situation where the people you're communicating to, you can reasonably believe that they are acquainted with another person's work, that they find that person's work persuasive, and that you have had enough private interactions with this person or enough like genial interactions with them to be reasonably confident that they are like legitimately bullshitting. Like you've been respectful with them, you've presented them with evidence in like a non-judgmental way, you've like talked through it, and like you're just getting like hate or rhetoric thrown back at you in extreme inflexibility, and that like reasonably, if they were being honest and objective, they would have at least softened their stance a little bit.
Yeah.
I think in that situation, maybe a public call out is warranted, because like you can likely positively affect a substantial number of people who otherwise may have been taken in by BS.
Yeah, yeah.
I think more often what happens is like it's someone who's a relatively easy punching bag, like let's say Food Babe, for example.
No clue who that is. Is that just like a Instagrammer?
Dave Asprey, Bulletproof Exec. Do you know who that is?
No clue.
Oh man, just throw out some
BS influencer.
Yeah, it
obviously, just straight up, you can basically tell if you know anything about fitness at the BSing.
So you mentioned Simeon Panda earlier, so let's just go with that. So let's say Simeon Panda puts out a video and he's saying a bunch of bullshit, and I'm considering whether I want to call him out or not. So like the first thing I have to ask myself is, what percentage of my audience is already aware of this guy?
Yeah.
And what percentage of people who take me seriously as an authority also take him seriously as an authority? And that's basically 0 people.
Yeah. Hopefully.
Yeah, I would. Man, there are times when I'll just like be tagged like on Twitter or something. It's like, oh, you should follow these people who have been like hugely influential to me, and it's like, me and like a couple other people I respect, and then like 1 or 2 people who are just like, oh, geez, like, what did this happen?
What happened? Yeah.
So I'm sure there are some like Greg Nuckols / Simeon Panda fans out there, but I at least hope that they're very much in the minority. So then think through that. Like, what am I actually accomplishing? I might be exposing people to his content who otherwise would not have been exposed to it, which I think would be a net negative. I'm likely not changing any minds because I'm preaching to the choir. Like, the people who I'm reaching with this message, 99% chance they would have agreed with me in the first place. And
so it's sort of like an echo chamber in a way. It's sort of like saying, fuck this dude. Then everyone else is going to say, yeah, fuck that dude.
Yeah, and generally, so someone like Simeon Panda, like, generally, I'm not even going to be able to make an object lesson out of it and be able to teach my audience something useful in the process, because the stuff he says is so dumb that, like,
it's just like, there's no point.
Yeah, so like there are levels to it. So there are some people who are bullshit artists who sound convincing on first blush.
Yeah. Like here's one. I won't mention the name, but I want to know if you know this person and what. Don't say the name or anything.
No, I don't know.
No, I don't know. Okay, because this guy, I'm still I'm still clueless as to whether it's BS or not. I think some of it must be, but a lot of it seems very well rooted in science. But it's very, very conflicting.
Yeah,
and it's still hard for me to tell. And like I follow people like yourself and Eric Helms, and that's the majority of what I follow. And then this guy, it's like very, very conflicting.
So take someone like that, for example. So I don't know who that person is. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, that he is a charlatan, scam artist, etc. But also has like a fair amount of like sway and pull in the communities in which you frequent.
Yes.
Then like, you know, if you've tried to talk things over with this person in private and it hasn't really gone anywhere, but like the bullshit they're weaving is actually interesting and potentially convincing, then it can be both, one, useful on a utilitarian sense to call them out, to hopefully like keep people from getting taken in by their bullshit. You're probably not exposing their content to people who otherwise wouldn't have been exposed to it, because they kind of run in circles you do. And also, like, if it's artistic bullshit that has a kernel of truth in it, then like debunking it and discuss, you can actually get into interesting stuff. And like, independent of calling this person out, you can probably teach your audience something like useful and worthwhile in the process. So I think it can be useful in situations like that. But what I see far too often is people just like doing call outs in people who like really, it just shouldn't matter to them. Like, you know, calling out like random like Instagram models or whatever.
Yeah, just for their Fit Tea ad, because it's like we all kind of know at this point it's BS.
Yeah.
And it's like there's not much point. Do you feel like it's ego?
I think it's establishing tribal identity, honestly. So I think it's something more like you're not actually affecting anything good, because you know you're preaching to the choir. You know your audience is not influenced by this person and will fully agree with you.
Yeah.
What you're essentially doing, and like, I think people use this as like a pejorative, but it is actually like a useful frame of analysis. Like, you're virtue signaling. Like you're saying like, you know, I know what we as a clan believe, and by calling this person out who has heterodox beliefs relative to what we all profess to believe, I'm like showing like my virtue and place in this tribe. Right. Like I think that's ultimately what people are doing. Like,
so it's sort of showing legitimacy by showing, yep, look, I understand what's not good.
Correct. Like and also like people respond to like emotional language, you know. Like, so if you act like, maybe you are like legitimately super fired up about it, but at least like if you act like you're super fired up about it, like it's not just indignation, it's righteous indignation. Like it's like that resonates with people, and so like, you know, you get a lot of likes, you get a lot of comments, and hopefully like some of this other person's supporters like stumble upon what you said and they start arguing in the comments, and the algorithms love that, so that like gets you trending and gets your stuff bumped up on the timeline and whatever. So like, I think so. I think some people do it because they see a lot of other like quote unquote evidence-based people doing that, and they're like, oh, so this must be what I have to do to like fit in with this community. But I think a lot of people kind of at the top who do that habitually, it's kind of I think it's calculated a lot of the times, honestly.
It's not just a random emotional, oh, fuck this dude, let me post about it. It's like they've thought about it. Like, for instance, I don't think you would ever see someone like Eric. You wouldn't see Eric go and say, fuck this dude, what a dickhead, retard. Like, I just wouldn't, you wouldn't expect it. Would you say it's probably better and safer long term to not call people out? Because basically so far I've had a blanket statement. Pretty much I'm not going to call people out. Like, and if I have to address something, I'll try and address it as anonymously as possible. Like, just so there's no Like, there's someone who rolls in similar circle that I do, from the same area as I do, but they were trying to push a natty test booster, and I was like, come on, like, and I didn't want to call them out and just say, don't follow this person, because that wouldn't have had much of an impact. But I basically just sort of said, I don't know if I actually said anything on my story or anything, but I sort of just said to the person, I was like, hey, I can't support your messages anymore. Like, that's just not what I'm about. Like, you shouldn't be, because basically they said they want to grow their delts, and then to do that they said, yeah, I'm going to get on a natty test booster to do that, but I guarantee their training is not near optimal. And I was just like, come on, like, as a personal trainer, that should not be your first port of call. And it just made me insanely, like, mad. But I was like, there's no point me calling them out on my story, because what is the point of that? Like, do you think it's safer to do that in the long term, just to not call people out on a whim?
I really don't know, honestly. So, like, that's not how I operate. Like, I've been, quote unquote, in the industry for like 6 or 7 years now, and you could probably count on one hand the number of people that I've like called out directly. And I can't think of a time that I called someone out that I don't now regret it.
Right. Yeah.
Partially just because like I'm very conflict averse. So like it doesn't mesh with me personally.
Right.
But I wouldn't necessarily say that avoiding it is necessarily best long term. Just from like a purely like egoistic perspective.
Right.
So like not to single these people out, and like I preface this by saying like I like both of these dudes and I respect their work a lot. So like he does it much less, or maybe not at all anymore. But like Brett Contreras used to call a lot of people out, and like he's doing just fine. And like Martin McDonald still calls a lot of people out. Like like, I mean, I don't follow him super closely, but I feel like almost every time something of his pops up in my timeline, it's like him calling out Joe Wicks. I think that's that guy's name.
Right.
And like, you know,
those people are.
Like, they're both doing very well. They're very respected, and I personally don't think that's a, like, I don't think that those call-outs have really affected much. Yeah,
it's not a negative.
But like if they wanted to message me and say like, oh, I have like concrete evidence that like I've massively cut into Joe Wick's following by calling them out all the time, like I'm perfectly open to that. So yeah, like not saying that what they've done is bad, but saying like those are two people who either have previously or currently, you know, called people out on bullshit, who have and continue to be very successful in the fitness industry. So yeah, I think it's just different strokes for different folks. Like that's not my style. It is other people's style. I'm not necessarily going to say that one approach is better or worse. And let me clarify. I'm not calling out Brett and Martin. Like if that works for them and they have pure motives and it's being effective, like that's great. More power to them. Just not how I roll personally.
I think that's probably the way that I will tend to go, because I think I make a few rash decisions and I wouldn't want to make that while calling someone out. Because say if I misconstrued what someone said and then it turned out it wasn't BS and I just look like an idiot. So I think it's a dangerous game to play in some spaces, but you know, it has.
I think what you just said is really important. So I think that something that both Brett and Martin do that a lot of just like people who do random call outs don't do. And I think this is one of the important things to make sure that like if a call out is going to be efficacious, like this is a necessary precondition. I feel like something that's incredibly important is making sure that you actually understand what the other person is saying.
Yeah.
So I think it was Nietzsche who said something to the effect of like the worst possible thing for your position is someone who agrees with you that like dramatically, that makes basically really really shitty arguments in favor of your position.
Yeah.
He obviously said it much better than I did. But that general concept. So like, if it's like a really sloppy call out and it's based on straw men, or even like not intentional straw men, but just like you're misinterpreting what the other person's saying, or interpreting their beliefs and ideas as uncharitably as possible.
Yes.
I think ultimately like that hurts your position and that hurts what you stand for.
Yeah.
So I think like if you're going to call someone out, like you need to make sure you have your ducks in a row.
Yes. You need to understand what you're actually talking about as well. Because it's like, say, a lot of people at parties, like just at a social event, they will debate me. And it's like just on fitness or something, my friend will bait me and he'll say like, oh, bro, he'll say some dumb bro science shit, knowing that it's wrong just to piss me off. Or like, there'll be someone else there who he knows agrees with it. And then I'll be there and I'll just have to like hold myself back or just go ham. And it's like, a lot of the time, before I even talk to them, I'll have to basically say, what are we exactly talking about here? And I'm like, fuck, it is frustrating, but
yeah,
it's. Do you have to hold yourself back? Do you find, say, if someone you know personally says, "Oh, I want to grow my glutes, so I'm going to go on the you know that little thing you stand on and it vibrates, that thing. I'm going to go do squats on that." Yep, that's their plan. Do you find it hard to hold yourself back from being like, hey, boom, 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 boom. You know, like I can imagine it's quite a hard thing because I was talking about it a while ago and I think a lot of it's like, for me, I think whenever I go boom, 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 it's like ego. And I'm just trying to show myself that I'm smart, which I think is bad.
So, man, more often than not, I just don't care. I think that the passion with which you try to refute an idea should be directly proportional, not necessarily to how wrong the idea is, but how dangerous it is. So like, for example, like in a situation like that, they say they want to do squats on a vibrating platform. Like, whatever. It's probably not the most effective way that they could train their glutes, but like, they're not going to hurt themselves doing it.
Hopefully not.
So like, if they ask for my input, like I'll give my 2 cents, and then if they still go out and do squats on a vibrating platform, like I just don't care. Like I can't bring myself to care about that.
Yeah.
But if it's so I think like the only, like one of the few like evidence-based fitness punching bags that like I do actually get fired up about is Dave Asprey, Bulletproof Exec. Because like I think that the ideas that, or some of the ideas he promotes aren't just wrong. I think they're actually dangerous. So like he promotes, like if you follow his like bulletproof diet and lifestyle or whatever.
Right. Is he the one who made bulletproof coffee?
Yeah,
Right.
That's the guy.
Right.
So like one of his big things is he's also like very anti-exercise.
What?
Like one of the things he uses to like promote his whole system is like you can get healthy without exercise. And so like I don't think that's just a bad idea. Like I think that's a dangerous idea.
Yeah.
Because like sedentary behavior and activity are positive predictors of a whole host of bad things.
Yeah, that's fucking ridiculous. Like.
So if it was, you know, if he was just like another random low carb dude, like I wouldn't. If he was like a random low carb dude swindling people by getting them to buy expensive coffee, like I just couldn't bring myself to care about that. Like, people waste money on stupid shit all the time, and if that happens to be coffee, like
that's fine.
Like I just don't care.
Yeah.
But if he adds like, oh, and you also shouldn't exercise all that much, or like if you follow all of this stuff, you don't need to worry about exercise. Don't do that. Like, I think that's like a legitimately dangerous idea that like warrants being called out.
Yes.
So if people are promoting something that's just like generally garden variety dumb, but ultimately probably not dangerous, like I just don't care. And if someone asks my opinion, like, I'll give my opinion, and then just move on with life. So yeah, like, yeah, I think that it's, I think one of the things that ultimately limits the effectiveness of the evidence-based community overall is, I think we're good at defining ourselves by like what we're against and not so much what we're for.
Right. Yes.
And we focus so much on, like, you know, who's out there saying things that are incorrect that we can call out and tear down. And like, I don't think that's a bad thing. Like, there are bad ideas, and I would say, like, in a strictly utilitarian calculus, like, yeah, it's probably better to call out bad beliefs than to say nothing at all.
Yeah.
But I think it's probably even better to put forth, like, a positive vision of, like, here's what we actually believe and here's what you should actually do, not just
it'll get more clicks? Like, do you think, saying, if I say Dave Asprey's a retard, blah, 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 do you find that sort of will get more clicks than, say, without mentioning Dave Asprey, say, I don't know what he believes in, but say, oh, exercise is actually good, you should probably exercise. I think that'll get less clicks than saying, look at this retard, blah, blah, blah. Like, if you know Philion, like, he's just a YouTuber, and he just calls people out. That's all he does. And I think his content is a bit infuriating, because some of it's, I think, misguided, but it's like, all he does is call people out, and he's gone from like 7,000 subscribers to like 250,000 in like 3 months. And that's all he's done is call people fake natties, and that's all he does. And it's like, that gets more clicks, and it's going to drive more traffic, but obviously it's not productive.
Here's what I'll say. I think that, so kind of looping back around to our initial discussion about having a business, I think that there's a difference between like acquiring an audience and actually like being able to build a business off of an audience.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that like calling out a lot of people in like an inflammatory and generally loud way, that's a great way to get attention. Some of it's going to be positive, some of it's going to be negative, and like honestly, like drama is just fun. Like I have some guilty pleasure YouTube channels I follow purely for the drama. Like I don't really care who's right or who's wrong. Like it's the reason people watch the Kardashians. Like it's mindless entertainment, and it's drama, and drama's fun for most people. But then like the question becomes like, okay, like if you're trying to build an audience off of it, like if it's on YouTube and you wind up with like 2 million subscribers, like maybe you're pulling down a decent income just in ad revenue or something. But you know, if you're trying to sell like an information product, or you're trying to sell coaching, like what have you shown your audience to demonstrate like your own expertise? Like you're just constantly calling people out, but not putting forth like, and here's what I believe, and like here's what's going to be good for you. And so like, you know, I think it's a good way to grow an audience, but not necessarily a great way to grow a business, if that makes sense. So the example you gave earlier, of like, if you wrote an article just like systematically dismantling everything Dave Asprey believes and stands for, but it's not like a call out, you don't say his name, is that going to get as many clicks? Probably not. But like, I've also kind of done a lot of that. So like, I don't call out that many people by name, but like there will be, so one of the things that I do when I'm selecting topics to write about is, you know, just generally looking to see what online fitness people are talking about, and seeing what ideas are both incorrect and very popular, and writing articles to address those things.
So effectively debunking large things that not just one person, but large ideas that are probably wrong.
Those ideas can be traced back to like one person, or like a small handful of people.
Yes.
I do sometimes write stuff with like an individual in mind. Where it's like, I'm going to eviscerate everything this person believes stands for. But it's not a call out. Like,
you're not going to say, fuck this dude, you know. You're just gonna say.
It's more like critiquing an idea and then putting forth like a positive vision of like, here is what's actually true and will be useful for you. So I think like each one of those articles probably gets less clicks than they would have if it were just like a pure call out.
Yeah.
But I ultimately think that in terms of like the value it provides the reader, like I think it's more useful content.
Yeah, and I think it'll last longer as well. Like it's.
Yeah.
I think you love the book, The Perennial Seller, because it's like it's literally basically making it last a long time, and that will be like if you say fuck Simeon Panda because he said this thing on this one YouTube video compared to this is how you do X, Y, and Z. It's like that's going to last a lot longer because it's just timeless. Like it's
and critiquing an idea is going to be more durable than critiquing a person because people come and go, but like ideas, even bad ideas, tend to last for a long time. You know? Yeah,
that's the sad thing. Anyway, I think we should probably finish up there because I don't want to take too much time. But so, where can people find you? Where can people find Stronger by Science? Where can people find everything Greg Nuckles, everything and anything?
So my writing, my free stuff, you can find at strongerbyscience.com. If you would like to check out the research review that I put out every month along with Eric Helms and Mike Zourdos, that's called MASS, Monthly Applications in Strength Sport. You can check that out at strongerbyscience.com/mass. And if you'd like to download a free issue to check it out before potentially buying, you can find a free issue at strongerbyscience.com/mass-best-of, I think. If you want to follow me on social media, I'm most active on Facebook, and I also have an Instagram, and they're just both Greg Nuckles.
Thank you guys so much for listening to this episode of the Student Side Hustle. I would appreciate so much if you would leave a review if you'd like to hear more of what I'm saying. Then I would love if you would follow me on Instagram or check out my other social media, all linked in the show notes. And again, I would just like to say thank you so much for listening. Have a wonderful evening and study hard.